Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we will be recapping our reviews for the month of April 2024. This video will feature three things: a discussion of our favorite coffee this month, as well as any honorable mentions, our upcoming coffee of the month, and anything else pertaining to this channel that we feel is worth discussing or addressing. So let's go ahead and get started with our honorable mentions, and as always, these are in order of when we reviewed them on this channel. And first up, we have the Juan Peña, the wash processed Ecuador from Bots Coffee out of Whiting, Indiana. And I won't discuss this coffee too much as we're going to be discussing a number of Mejorado coffees in this video. But this is my favorite Bots coffee that we've ever reviewed on this channel, mostly because it is the most consistent coffee that we've ever had from them. In addition to that, it did offer plenty of the trademark Mejorado sweetness, making it easily my favorite coffee that we've ever had from them. This one, unfortunately, is no longer available for purchase. Right, next up, we're going to be discussing two coffees side by side. The first of which is the Mario Sorsa, the wash processed Peru from Sey Coffee out of Brooklyn, New York. And then next is the Percy Pentado, the wash processed Peru from September Coffee Company out of Ottawa, Ontario. And both of these coffees are wash processed Peruvian geishas, and that's the main reason we're discussing them side by side. In addition to that, I did compare them side by side as we reviewed them back to back, and I found them both offering similar characteristics, including some very intense sweetness and great clarity, as well as both of them were seemingly reminiscent of energy drinks to me. These coffees are two of my favorite coffees that we've had from these coffee roasters, especially this year. With Sey, it's one of my favorite Sey coffees I've had this year. And with this Percy Pentado, it's one of my favorite coffees that we've ever had from September, continuing to show that both these coffee roasters are capable of some amazing things. Unfortunately, neither of these coffees are still available for purchase. All right, let's move these out of the way. And next up, we have the Cruz Loma, the wash processed Ecuador from Moonwake Coffee Roasters out of San Jose, California. And I wanted to give a very quick shout out to them because our Moonwake video actually did way better than I was expecting, as so many of you were interested in hearing our feedback on this coffee roaster. And it is really interesting given that they had this coffee on their website for a while, and it took a little bit of time for me to actually pull the trigger and finally purchase this coffee, mostly because I was waiting for them to offer something else. And unfortunately, that moment never came, so this is the only coffee that we've ever reviewed from them. But given just how much you guys enjoyed the review, it's entirely possible we'll go back and review them again. But I actually really like the coffee, and once again, not surprising given that this is a Mejorado coffee, and I found it to have some tremendous sweetness to it. So massive credits to Moonwake on this one. I think that they did a very nice job with it. And unfortunately, now this one's no longer available for purchase. Right, next up, we have the Abel Salinas, the wash processed Ecuador from September Coffee Company, once again, out of Ottawa, Ontario. And like with the other coffees, those Mejorados that we've mentioned, this one continued to offer some tremendous sweetness. And it's interesting, after this review was posted, I did have a brief conversation with Kyle, and he did kind of validate a lot of my thoughts on this coffee, as he said that they went a slightly different direction with this coffee for a number of reasons. And I won't go too much into that, but it did make me feel good about my assessment on this coffee, because I noticed that it just felt a little bit more developed than a number of the other coffees that we have had from September in the past. Outside of that, though, there were some wonderful characteristics to this one, as I could say that this is one of my favorite Mejorado coffees that we've had this entire year. And as you can see based off of this video, I review quite a few Mejorado coffees on this channel. And this one offered not just that great sweetness, but in addition to that, some wonderful peachy aspects to it. And given that both of those things were present in this coffee throughout, it definitely made it one of my favorite Mejorado coffees we've had. The only thing that really held it back from maybe being my favorite coffee this month, or one of my favorite coffees the entire year, was mostly because it did have that ever so slight smoky quality to it. Outside of that, though, I did find this to be a wonderful coffee, and out of all the coffees we've discussed up to this point, it's probably my second favorite, only to the one that we're going to be discussing here next, and that is the Mejorado WX, the wash processed Ecuador from Coffea Circular out of Gothenburg, Sweden. And this coffee finalized our Gala Morales series, as this is the final coffee I needed to review all of the coffees that Coffea Circular had released with them. And The main reason for this one being my favorite was mostly because this one was the most complex. In addition to offering that wonderful sweetness, it did offer some great fruit aspects as well. And like I'd mentioned with that Abelsinas, it seems like they might have pushed this one a little bit more in terms of the development, but it didn't necessarily hinder this coffee too much, as it continued to offer so many of the cleaner and sweeter aspects that I have experienced from so many wash-processed Mejorado coffees recently. And I do have to say that I think this was a nice way to kind of cap off that entire series, as it does remain probably, if not one of my favorite Mejorado coffees this entire year. And once again, we're reviewing so many of them this year, mostly because I continue to enjoy them as much as I do. They're just wonderfully sweet coffees, as this one certainly was. This one is still available for purchase, interestingly enough, as well as another Mejorado coffee that Café Circular has on their website, and we're going to be reviewing that one here in the near future. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our coffee of the month, which is the Santiago Chiguri, I believe is how it's said, a wash processed Mexico from Thankfully Coffee. And just like last month where I did not have the Picky Chemist coffee yet, I don't have this coffee yet, so we're using our only other Thankfully Coffee review, the Pepe Jijon that we reviewed from them last year. We're using the bag to kind of showcase the coffee that we're going to be discussing from them. But the main reason I don't have their coffee is because we actually waited a little bit on the poll. And just like with the Picky Chemist last month, it was to kind of see what coffees Thankfully might be releasing as well. And we are going to be purchasing another coffee from them, which is I believe it's Gloria Cecilia, a wash-processed Colombian coffee that a lot of people have actually been very interested in. It's a Chirroso coffee, and that was the main reason I waited on purchasing the coffee from them as well. So we do have both of those coffees on the way, and we're going to be discussing and reviewing both of them here in the near future. But the theme this month was going to be the Mexican coffees, as we've been continuing our theme of basically creating polls with origins that we don't review too often, and we haven't done necessarily an amazing job of reviewing Mexican coffees this year, even though Mexican coffee has really improved a lot over the last couple of years. But Thankfully Coffee did win both polls, so congratulations to them, and I'm definitely looking forward to revisiting some of their coffees here in the near future. And that takes us into the next thing I wanted to discuss, and that's if you guys wanted us to do a month of a decaf poll. And the main reason I bring that up is because we've received a number of questions and comments asking if we have ever or will ever review any decaf coffees. And usually my response to that is I'm not overly familiar with decaf coffees. I've only had 2 in the last 10 or so years. And even before then, I hadn't drank any decaf coffees. So it hasn't been something that I've reviewed or done a lot or tried a lot in my entire life. So that's why it might be a little interesting. I'm not sure if I would necessarily be the best person to do that. But given that we've gotten a number of requests for them, and it sounds like decaf coffee has improved a lot over the last couple of years, then I'd be interested to hear from you guys if you wanted us to do one poll where we do include decaf coffees. And I do want to give my 2 very quick anecdotes about having had decaf coffees recently. One of which was in our Probat versus Typhoon blind taste test video, where one of those samples was a decaf coffee. And if you watched that video, then you saw that I had a little bit of a different reaction to that coffee, mostly because I could tell that it was a little different from the other coffees on that table. And then the only other example is from an unnamed coffee roaster, where they accidentally sent me a decaf bag instead of the bag that we had actually purchased. And when I was drinking that coffee, I sent them a message and said, hey, there's something off about this coffee. And then they realized that they had sent me a decaf bag in error. So those are the only 2 experiences I've had with decaf coffees. I want to say pretty much ever. But if you guys really want us to review a decaf coffee, then we will create a poll next month and we will do a decaf coffee review. As you can see, not overly excited about it, but if you guys want it, we'll give it a shot. And that takes us into our next couple of things. The first thing I wanted to discuss is the Mejorado coffees that Sey has released recently, because we did receive a number of questions as to whether or not we were going to be purchasing that coffee, and we did put on our Instagram story that we did purchase both of those coffees, and I don't think that'll come as a huge surprise to anybody, given that both of them sound like coffees that I very much wanted to try. I just wanted to notate that for anybody that is interested. At the time of recording, they do have one available, but I'd be really surprised if they had any or either of those coffees available by the time this video is released. And that takes us into our last subject, and this is something I wanted to discuss very quick, and I wanted to bring up a new subscription service, and it's called Airworks Coffee. And the main reason I wanted to bring up this subscription service is because we've received so many questions from people about where they can purchase the international coffee roasters that we review on this channel. And Airworks is a newer company, and it was started by somebody that was a former Sound and Fog employee. And as a lot of you guys know, Sound and Fog is one of my favorite coffee shops in all of Seattle. And it's a coffee shop that I've been going to for, I want to say, 7 years or so now, one I have extensive familiarity with. And when I found out about this subscription service, I did take a look at it, and they are going to be including some very exciting coffee roasters in their first month. And I have had some conversations with the owner of the company, mostly because it's a product that interests me a lot, and I'm going to try to review some of their coffees, mostly because they're offering coffees that I am actually genuinely interested in purchasing. The first month that they do have includes a Rwandan coffee from Appleons Gold, and given just how much I've enjoyed Appleons Gold's coffees, I decided to purchase that one, so we are going to be reviewing that coffee. But I did want to give them a major shout out for a number of reasons. One, because I really like the idea of an international subscription service that's based in the United States, given that so many people have been wanting to purchase that. But that's the other reason, because so many people have been asking where they can get these coffees, given that they aren't necessarily the easiest coffees to obtain. Now, I do have to say there are a number of also heavily processed coffees that are going to be included, so those aren't necessarily for me, but I will definitely be keeping my eye on so many of the wash processed offerings that they are going to have in the near future. I will link their information down below in this video. But honestly, I think that's about it for this video. I wanted to thank you guys for watching all this content. Really appreciate it. We've seen some really nice growth over the last couple of months as well. So this right here has been a recap of our reviews in the month of April 2024. Thank you for watching.